Hello guys, welcome back to Mr. Sikowski's History Channel. For this part, I'm going to be doing part 2 of World War One. The third part will be the Russian Revolution. I like to separate it into a separate little bubble because Russia has its own story arc after World War One in AP European history that you want to really focus on to know the whole story of Russia. So it's good to separate it on its own because it kind of leads to next phases of history. So going back, I left off with the first part on the Schieffelin Plan. The Schieffelin Plan is named the Schieffelin Plan after Alfred von Schieffelin, right? Like, come on. So this whole plan is for Germany to avoid having a war on two fronts. Two fronts means on two sides, right? If I had two people fighting me on each side, it'd be hard for me to get into a fight with two people facing me at the same time. So what this Schieffelin Plan is basically to march through neutral Belgium, which you can see this image here better than my hand gesture, I'm sure. They want to go through neutral Belgium, do a surprise hit because France wouldn't expect an attack through Belgium because it's a neutral area coming through a different country. If anything, they'll expect it on the border between Germany and France right here. Then they want to go in, quickly hook around, knock out France, knock out the military installations, take out the coveted Paris, which is basically the gem of France, and then hook back towards Germany. Their whole purpose is to hook back towards Germany and then go, if you can't see on the map here, but they want to go and basically attack the Russians, okay? So they have France and Russia on one side, so the whole point of this is to hook around Belgium, knock out France like a quick punch, and turn around and then go attack those Russians. And the whole thought of that was France was more of seen as a threat, and Russia was still mobilizing. And the Germans thought that the Russians would take a lot longer to mobilize, so that's their whole thought process. And this is the whole purpose of doing this, is to avoid having a war on two fronts, right? They don't want to have a war on two sides, so they hopefully take out one guy quick, turn around, and then go after the other guy. That's their hopes with the Schieffelin Plan, and in hindsight, it doesn't work out, but in reality, it's a good plan because basically they don't want to get bogged down in this idea of a war. But as others thought that the war would be short and painless, the war drags on. They get bogged down in France, right? And on top of that, the Russians do mobilize faster. So now the fear of what happens in World War One, it comes to fruition. Germany has a war on two fronts. On the western fronts, France, and the eastern front, Russia, borders of the Ottoman Empire start to become bogged down. And this is literally when you get the idea of trench warfare and the idea that these two sides get engulfed and basically a stalemate emerges for the lines that are drawn at the Schieffelin Plan and at the start of World War One don't change, maybe by inches, maybe a couple miles on either side throughout the war. Remember how wars kind of like they take into a country or an area or an island or whatever. World War One starts and World War One ends where it starts. Now, the idea basically going forward needs to be something called a total war, is a term that they like to throw out there. And the total war means that they realize to get anything going through World War One, it can't just be something that's only done by the military officers. It actually has to be something that's a total war of civilization. Meaning, so before this time frame, if people went off to war, your soldiers went off to fight, they would go fight, but the civilians at home would be at home and pretty much their lives would be really intact compared to what the people in the military were doing, right? Like the military officer, you trained your whole life, you go off and fight, and your family would be kind of just going through the motions of family life every day. Now, realizing that this war is not one of those wars that last a couple of weeks or months, the classic wars, right? This is an actual war that's going to take a lot longer. So to get anything done, civilians at home realize that their lives need to be changed, altered. They need to contribute more from where normally wars that they would never, kind of like their lives wouldn't change that much. Now they have to be full in on this of, saving materials, doing whatever they can to make this war go and end it as soon as possible. So this idea of total war means that civilian liberties at home now are drastically changed in war forever to get an outcome at this time. So to actually get anything done, they need to actually create this idea of a total war. Now, this is something that's we're more used to today for issues of going forward, because any type of war that we have in our era basically involves our lives in one way or another. Like I like to say to my students, it's like the war on terrorism is a good idea to think about, because the war on terrorism means to attack and not to take out terrorists, right? Terrorist activities and stuff like that. We can all agree on that. That's a good idea to do. But there's certain civil liberties that we kind of lose out on when it's coming out to the ideas of to root out terrorism. So, for instance, like civil liberties of privacy could be an issue at home, while governments try to monitor citizens to hopefully stamp out any previously thought out terrorist activities. Yet the ideas of privacy and civil liberties are infringed upon, or changed, or put down, or controlled in that way due to prevent future terrorist activities. So that's something that you can think of, kind of incorporates the new digital age, and kind of how what they start to deal with World War One, something that they weren't used to in prior wars. Like you would have an uncle, a father go off to war, but your lives would be kind of within the same, as long as I'm having that family unit, or that family, sorry, not the unit, that part of the family unit out. They'll come back in or not come back in, and then things would be going on. Also, the casualty lists in World War One were like uncomprehensible. Like they couldn't comprehend the ideas of this many people dying in a war. It's just not on their radar yet. Maybe like 500,000 or a couple 100,000 were the most ever thought of losing in war battles and stuff like that. Now this is like tens of millions of people die in World War One, something they can even fathom. So the idea of total war is also important because women start to work in factories. They start to pick up the jobs that men are not doing. And this is important too for women's rights later on, because women could do the jobs of men, obviously, but this is where they actually prove to the world that they can. And one outcome that they actually get by showing that they could do this to the world is a lot of the countries in Europe and then in America actually allow women the right to vote, which is huge for women's rights because it's the first step on progressing women's issues going forward. And it's only through World War One, a war for the world to realize that women should have the same rights to vote as men. And later on, that changes even further with World War Two. I'll talk about that in my other PowerPoint. Now, the major battles of World War II, the Battle Marine, was basically the first huge stalemate on the Western Front. So when they talk about the Western Front, you think about it in books and all this other stuff in World War I, and they're talking about the Western Front. It's basically where Germany is going towards the west to France, and that's that borderline, that's that Western Front of how they get bogged down between Germany and France, and that's literally referred to as the Western Front. And basically, they go through Belgium, defended its homeland, and they fell back. While this was happening, the Russians were obviously mobilizing quicker, as I said, and this split German forces down the middle, and German forces were not as strong, so instead of playing offense on taking out fully France and then hooking back and hitting the Russians, they put most of it, they split up their resources, and now they got into a defensive battle of keeping their lines of wherever they attacked, preventing the Russians from attacking them, and then pushing and keeping the ground that they made up in France, and then kind of like fighting a war on two sides, which basically created this huge stalemate, which really led to millions of people dying over the time of World War One. On September 6th, the French attacked the Gap in German Battle Marine, and for 3 days, everything went into an attack to counter the Germans' advances. And the Great Push pushed the Germans back and basically stopped this invasion, the Schieffelin Plan, ultimately leading the Schieffelin Plan to it failed, okay, because it didn't really achieve what it was set out to do. If anything, it achieved the war on two fronts a lot quicker rather than what it was created to do. With Germany being split and not wanting to give up now that the war started, it basically became a huge stalemate. Like in Cat's game, no country pushed further than the others. New weapons, hand grenades, poison gas, all that stuff in the last part and part video one, if you haven't seen it, basically puts death on a level never seen before by human history because of these machines that were made by people, right? To kill people on an exponential level. Now it's the first time they're actually being utilized with countries being involved, and now the ideas of these wars and all these people dying is just immense. The trench lines now were basically something that was created, and this is the first time the idea of trench warfare was utilized. I don't know if I have a picture of it in the next one. So trench warfare is basically the idea is that since you're fighting someone with a machine gun now, no longer it's the old school version of like just a rifle and kind of aiming at someone. Now people are ducking and digging holes, and now the holes that they dug right when the war started is basically where they're going to be for the next 4 years of World War One, and it becomes these long, drawn out, encapsulated, like almost like cities within themselves that are dug into these lines, these trenches, and this is an illustration of what it would look like on the side here. And basically, they have mess halls, they have areas for ammunition and barbed wires and food and everything. Like it would be basically, it's basically like almost like Go First, like living with these trenches in these types of situations. And a lot of movies portray the ideas of what it would be like staying in a hole for months at a time. Armies on both sides dug this, even though the great loss, new methods of warfare were being introduced as time was also evolving. And trench warfare was basically a battle of inches rather than miles, which historically armies have been fighting for. The next big battle to note in World War I for European history would be the Battle of Verdun. 700,000 soldiers died or killed or injured in this actual one battle alone. Remember the biggest, I think Napoleon's Continental Army, which was the biggest ever assembled in European history prior to this point, was 500,000 troops in totality of this grand army of Napoleon. This is 700,000 people in one battle being killed or injured. That's how the numbers are staggeringly high in this quote-unquote Great War, right? The next major battle was the Battle of Somme, which was the British offense taken in 1916 and showed the horrors of conditions of trench warfare and how it was basically fought. For 7 days and nights, they fired non-stop. The British artillery fired, and on the German lines, so this one Battle of Somme was so important because this one thing showed how messed up the war was, because the British bomb with 1.5 million shells. And all the Germans did was just stay deep into the holes, right? In their trenches, they have these underground areas. They just stayed there until the bombing finally ceased. Once the bombing ceased, the British thought, oh, this is the time to attack, because this was one way of actually trying to figure out these trench warfares, because they're not used to even using these types of styles of fighting. And then when the British attacked, the Germans just kind of popped out of their holes and just shot down the British, which was mass casualties going forward, and basically mowed them down. Like imagine hundreds of people running at you, and you just have an automatic machine gun in a hole. Like they're just sitting ducks. Like you're like at the carnival kind of thing. As horrible as that sounds, is that you're hurting killing these people on these huge, massive scales. So the reason why this is important is because they didn't really know how to fight people with machine guns. Like it was a new technology. Like how do I fight this person with a machine gun if I've been trained just to fight classically with soldiers lining up in a battlefield looking at each other and to attack, like in a major battlefield. So the whole dynamics of military tactics changed drastically in this one instance, and these soldiers and generals and everyone are learning on the fly of how to fight new methods. There's stories of some generals that they don't know how to take out machine guns, so their whole premise is to send wave after wave of troops at the machine gun in the hopes of two things happening. Either the machine gunner runs out of bullets and the troops can overtake the machine gun, or the machine gun overheats or has a jam in the bullets, and then the people can overtake the machine gun. And that was like the one strategy that they had at this new technology. So it shows you, imagine those people just sending wave after wave of people at this machine gun in hopes the machine gun like overheats or like has like a bullet, like a jammed bullet or something like that. In this one here, 420,000 British troops died, 200,000 French troops died, and 600,000 German troops died in this actual one attack. Now, the war starts to widen, and by widening, it means instead of being between these major powers, other countries start to be involved in the sense of how their involvement or how they're going to be playing into it goes forward. Now, the one that you got to think about coming into it is going to be America, as the war is quote unquote widening. Now, throughout history, throughout American history, they've been very isolationist, meaning they didn't want to be involved in anything that was going on in Europe. Europe had wars and wars and wars. They're like, the Europeans do their wars, they're done with it, and we don't want any connection with it, because that's basically their prerogative. They get over it, they start it, they stop it, and then that's it. So this is going to be the end of part 2. What I'm going to do is I'm going to probably do this in a 4-parter. World War I starting, World War I happening, and then I'll start up with Lusitania, then end it with World War I, and then we'll talk about the Russian Revolution. So like, subscribe, do all that jazz. Hopefully you like this. This PowerPoint is available on Teachers Pay Teachers, the website that's there. So if you don't have a copy of it, you can get it. If you ever see this video, let me know. If you like it, thumbs up, all that jazz. Alright guys, thank you for watching.